The Las Vegas Aces just cut one of their best scorers 5 hours after making a roster move against the Indiana Fever, and almost nobody outside the league noticed what actually happened. Because buried inside that transaction is a second story, one involving Caitlin Clark's actual return to the floor, a minutes restriction that is already dividing her own coaching staff's decisions, and a road trip to Las Vegas that could tell us more about the rest of the Fever's season than anything that has happened in the last month. Before we get into it, if you follow the Fever or Caitlin Clark closely, subscribe and turn on notifications because this stretch of the schedule is about to get a lot more interesting. On July 7th, the Las Vegas Aces made a decision that stunned people around the league. They waived Chennedy Carter, one of the more productive bench scorers in the entire WNBA this season, just hours after tendering a standard contract offer sheet to a completely different player from the Indiana Fever's developmental roster. Two separate transactions on the same day, tied together in a way that tells you everything about how differently these two organizations are operating right now. Let's start with Carter, because her career path getting here is worth understanding before we get to the ending. Atlanta drafted her 4th overall back in 2020, and she flashed real star potential early, making that year's all-rookie team and showing off the kind of 3-level scoring ability that made her one of the more talked-about young guards in the league. But the on-court promise came with off-court complications. She was suspended by the Dream in her second season for conduct detrimental to the team. From there, her career became a tour of the league. The Los Angeles Sparks waived her ahead of the 2023 season. She landed with the Chicago Sky, and in 2024, she actually led that team in scoring at 17.5 points a night, ranking 14th in the entire league in scoring and second among guards in field goal percentage. And yet, despite that production, the Sky still declined to extend her a qualifying offer after the season. With nowhere to go in the WNBA, Carter spent all of 2025 playing overseas, waiting for another shot. Las Vegas gave her that shot in April of 2026, signing her to a training camp contract. She made the most of it immediately. Carter opened the season red hot, carving out a role off Becky Hammon's bench and quickly becoming one of the most efficient scorers in that role anywhere in the league. Through her first stretch of games, she was averaging north of 12 points a night, while shooting an incredible 60% from the field for the season, at one point converting 62% of her twos and 54% of her threes during her best run. For a bench scorer on a prove-it deal, those are not just good numbers. Those are numbers that make a coaching staff look smart for finding her, and numbers that had people around the league discussing her as a real contender for 6th Player of the Year. Then the setbacks started. A left leg injury cost her time. An illness cost her more. She missed 7 of the Aces' 12 games in June alone, and across June and into July, her effectiveness cratered. In May, across 162 minutes on the floor, the Aces had a plus 14.4 net rating with Carter on the court. In June and July combined, in just 58 total minutes, that number collapsed to a negative 22.4 net rating. Her final 2 appearances for the team produced a combined 3 shot attempts. And on July 6th, in a game against the Indiana Fever with Aces star Aja Wilson unavailable, Carter played 15 minutes and produced nothing. 0 points on 0 for 2 shooting, 2 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal. The Aces lost that game 84-68, their first loss to Indiana all season. The very next day, before her contract could become fully guaranteed, Las Vegas waived her, choosing not to pay out the rest of her deal. It is now her 5th WNBA team in 5 active seasons, and given how she can still score when healthy, it is unlikely to be her last stop. The other side of the transaction. Here's where the story connects to Indiana. In that same 24-hour window, the Aces sent a standard contract offer sheet to Justine Pissott, a second-round pick who had been playing for the Fever on a developmental contract. Under the league's rules, a developmental contract only allows a player to appear in a limited number of games. When another team wants to actually promote that player to their full roster, they can send an offer sheet, and the player's original team gets a short window, in this case, 24 hours, to match it by promoting her themselves. Indiana had that chance. They chose not to take it. Pissott, a 6'4" guard and forward out of Vanderbilt who spent her senior year putting up career highs of 11.1 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 2.3 assists a game in college, and who had flashed real perimeter shooting ability in the preseason, is now a Las Vegas Ace instead of an Indiana Fever. Is that a decision worth questioning? Maybe. Development contract slots are limited. Roster math is unforgiving. And teams let young players walk in situations like this all the time around the league. But it is nowhere close to the story some corners of the internet have tried to tell about it. This wasn't Indiana discarding a proven, productive veteran for nothing. This was a standard roster mechanism playing out exactly the way the WNBA collective bargaining agreement is designed to let it play out. Las Vegas saw an opportunity in a rookie on a limited contract, made a move, and Indiana decided the return wasn't worth burning a full roster spot on a player who had appeared in exactly one preseason game for them. It helps to understand why development contracts exist in the first place. Every WNBA team is allowed to carry a small number of players on these deals, and it lets a team stash extra young talent, let them practice, let them travel with the team and learn the system without it counting against the 12-player standard roster limit. The trade-off is that those players can only appear in a capped number of actual games, and any other team in the league is free to try to poach them onto a full roster at any point by sending that kind of offer sheet. It is the same basic logic as a restricted free agent system in other sports, just compressed into a 24-hour window instead of a multi-week negotiating period. Most of the time, these moves happen quietly, buried under bigger transactions, and nobody outside hardcore roster construction circles even notices. This one only became a story because it landed on the same day as the Carter waiver, and because it involved a franchise as heavily covered as Indiana. What is genuinely interesting here is the timing on Las Vegas's side. The Aces essentially swapped one player for another on the same day, cutting a veteran scorer loose while adding a young prospect away from a rival roster. That's a front office making a bet on long-term upside over an established but oft-injured veteran on an expiring, non-guaranteed deal. Whether that bet pays off is a real storyline worth watching the rest of this season, but it is a Las Vegas storyline first, not evidence of anything resembling dysfunction in Indiana. The coach making these calls. It is worth pausing on who is actually running the Las Vegas side of these decisions, because Becky Hammon's resume is one of the more remarkable in basketball. She spent 7 seasons as an assistant under Greg Popovich in San Antonio, becoming the first woman to serve as a full-time assistant coach in NBA history and the first woman to act as head coach during an NBA regular season game after Popovich was ejected in 2020. She interviewed for the Portland Trail Blazers head coaching job in 2021 before Las Vegas hired her. And years later, when Popovich stepped away from the Spurs, her name was publicly floated by ESPN analysts as a legitimate candidate to replace him. Since taking over the Aces, she has won 3 WNBA championships. That is the basketball mind making the calls on Carter, on Pissott, and on how this Las Vegas roster gets built the rest of the way. It's a real credential, and it's exactly why a move like waiving a scorer this productive gets people around the league talking, regardless of what actually caused it. Meanwhile, the Fever had their own news. While that transaction was unfolding, the far bigger story for Fever fans was happening on the actual basketball court. Caitlin Clark made her return from a back injury on July 8th against the Los Angeles Sparks after missing 2 games. She had first been listed with the back issue back in May, when she was a late scratch before a game against Portland. And the injury flared up again after a physical June 22nd win over Phoenix that included a scuffle, 6 technical fouls, and an ejection of forward Myisha Hines-Allen. Clark said before the Sparks game that she was feeling great and hopeful to be full go, but that she expected to be on a minutes restriction as the Fever prepared for a difficult stretch, a back-to-back against the Sparks, and then the Phoenix Mercury just one night apart. Head coach Stephanie White confirmed Clark would play, while announcing that All-Star center Aaliyah Boston would sit that game with a right lower leg injury. This all comes in the middle of what has otherwise been a strong individual season for Clark. Just last week, she was named a starter for this year's All-Star game, and heading into the Sparks matchup, she had appeared in 17 of the Fever's first 20 games, averaging 21.2 points and 8.2 assists, good for 4th and 2nd in the league in those categories respectively. Her three-point shot had actually been trending up before the injury, hitting 3 or more triples in 5 of her previous 8 outings. It is also worth knowing she has picked up 5 technical fouls already this season, putting her 3 away from an automatic 1-game suspension, a detail that has nothing to do with her back, but adds one more thing for the coaching staff to manage as the summer stretch continues. What actually happened on the floor in Los Angeles did not go the way anyone in Indiana wanted. A rough night in Los Angeles. Clark played just 16 minutes, broken into short 3-minute shifts so the coaching staff could manage her back in real time. Between shifts, she left the bench area to keep herself loose rather than sitting still. She finished the night with 9 points on 4 of 12 shooting, going just 1 of 6 from 3-point range, with 4 rebounds, 3 assists, and 4 turnovers. Her plus-minus for the night was -16. Clark was honest about how difficult the in-and-out approach was afterward. She said it was really hard to find a rhythm, that she didn't get the usual feel for the game she normally builds over a full night on the floor. That is not a complaint about her coaching staff's caution. It is simply the reality of what a stop-and-start restriction does to a player who relies on rhythm and reads as much as she does. The Sparks, who were missing their own stars in Kelsey Plum and Cameron Brink, took full advantage. Los Angeles shot 51% as a team and hit 9 of 23s, cruising to a 106-92 win that snapped their own 3-game losing streak. Nneka Ogwumike led the way with 24 points and 8 rebounds. Ray Burrell added 22, and Derica Hamby chipped in 21 and 9 rebounds. It was, on paper, the kind of game a shorthanded team is not supposed to win this comfortably against a team fighting for playoff positioning. The weight on Kelsey Mitchell. With Clark limited and Boston out entirely, the scoring burden fell almost completely on Kelsey Mitchell, and she answered the call. Mitchell poured in 29 points on 9 of 18 shooting, including 5 of 9 from behind the arc. It wasn't enough to overcome a Sparks team playing with genuine desperation, but it continued a trend that has defined Mitchell's season. She currently leads the Fever in scoring, averaging 21.9 points a night, just ahead of Clark's own 21.2 average, giving Indiana a backcourt that ranks among the most productive scoring duos anywhere in the league. Between the two of them, the Fever have led the entire WNBA in points per game as a team this season. That is the part of this story that tends to get lost in the noise. This is not a struggling offense. This is not a team that lacks firepower. This is a team managing an MVP-caliber talent through a physical injury in the middle of a genuinely good season and taking the hit that comes with that caution on nights when the timing lines up badly against a motivated opponent. What comes next? The Fever did not get much time to process the loss. They played the second half of their back-to-back against Phoenix the very next night, this time with Clark held out entirely to protect her back for the rest of the trip, while Boston returned to anchor the front court. That decision, sitting Clark for a full game rather than pushing through on tired legs, is the kind of long-view roster management that actually supports the idea that this coaching staff is being careful with its most important asset, not careless with it. From there, the trip continues to Las Vegas, where the Fever face an Aces team now missing the exact player this whole story started with, Chennedy Carter, and dealing with the uncertainty around A'ja Wilson's own availability after she was already sidelined heading into that stretch. Clark has said her hope is to push her minutes restriction up toward the 25-minute mark by the time that game arrives, using the extra rest between games to build back toward a fuller workload. Whether the coaching staff actually lets her get there or holds her back again, given how the Sparks game played out, is one of the more meaningful decisions Stephanie White will make this month. Indiana enters that stretch, sitting at 12-9. Currently holding the highest winning percentage in the Eastern Conference, a mark that is easy to overlook given how much noise surrounds Clark's health status week to week. That record was built with wins over both the Sparks and the Aces just last week, before this current run of injury management complicated things. The margin between Indiana comfortably controlling their own playoff positioning and Indiana scrambling for it later in the season may come down to exactly how these next few weeks of minutes restrictions and rotation decisions are handled. There is also a bigger picture layer to the Las Vegas trip that makes it worth circling on your calendar beyond just the Carter connection. The Aces are dealing with their own uncertainty around A'ja Wilson's health, and a Fever team that already beat them once this season will be walking back into that building with something to prove, especially if Wilson is limited or held out entirely. Add in the fact that Indiana just watched Las Vegas source a piece of their own developmental pipeline through that offer sheet, and there is a natural storyline sitting right there for both fan bases heading into Sunday, even without anyone needing to invent one. The real question, Fever. Fans should be asking not whether the front office is quietly sabotaging its own superstar, because there is nothing in the actual public record that supports that theory. The real question is simpler and honestly more relevant to how the rest of this season plays out. Can Stephanie White find a way to manage Clark's back injury without repeating the disjointed stop-and-start performance we saw in Los Angeles? Can Kelsey Mitchell keep carrying this kind of scoring load without wearing down herself as the calendar pushes deeper into the summer? And when Indiana walks into Las Vegas for that rematch, will it be Clark closer to a normal workload, finally building rhythm again, or another cautious, choppy outing that leaves the offense searching for its footing? That is the version of this story that is actually happening, backed by what was reported and confirmed rather than by speculation dressed up as insider knowledge. And it is, if anything, a more interesting storyline than the one that got invented around it. A superstar working her way back from injury, a supporting cast proving it can hold the line without her at full strength. A former all-rookie scorer now searching for her sixth team in 5 years after a spectacular rise and an equally sudden fall in Las Vegas. And a road trip that puts all of it to the test in back-to-back nights against two Western Conference opponents who both have real motivation of their own. There is one more thing worth sitting with before we close this out. Stephanie White has a genuine decision in front of her in Las Vegas, one that nobody outside that locker room has actually made yet. Does Clark get pushed toward that 25-minute mark she's hoping for? And does the choppy in-and-out rhythm from the Sparks game finally smooth out into something that looks like her normal game? Or does the coaching staff pump the brakes again, protect the long-term health of a franchise cornerstone at the cost of another disjointed short-term performance, and let Kelsey Mitchell shoulder the load one more night? Both decisions are defensible. Both come with real consequences for how the rest of July plays out. And the answer to that question, not some invented boardroom conspiracy, is the thing actually worth watching when Indiana walks into that building. The answers start showing up on the floor in Las Vegas, and how Indiana handles the next stretch of this schedule is going to say a lot more about where this team is actually headed than any single roster transaction ever could. Make sure you're subscribed, because we will be breaking down exactly what happens the moment that final buzzer sounds.